Afternoon, everyone. We're about to get started. If folks can find a seat, there's a couple seats up front if folks need them. I'm Rachel Latchford, and I'm the Floodplains and Estuaries Implementation Strategy Lead on the HSIL team. And I'm excited to introduce our speakers in session, regulations, planning, and incentives. All 4 habitat implementation strategies identify that recovery success requires both an effective regulatory environment and voluntary stewardship through incentives and behavior change. In this session, we will hear about several projects that have worked to advance strategic outreach and engagement approaches through incentives to landowners that build public support and improve habitat. We'll also hear about how projects evaluate effectiveness of existing plans and habitat protection regulations, improving data collection and information for decision makers. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Robert Potnikoff, presenting on behalf of Snohomish County.
Thank you, Rachel. Well, welcome to the lightning round. You're about to hear the thunder. Our project really originates from our 2024 CAR Monitoring and Adaptive Management Report. And the goals for this project come from that, the difficulties that we experienced with that reporting and interpreting of the data. And what we found mostly was wetlands were a focus. They represented an awful large area in the critical area regulations map. And they also had some of the greatest loss. And we'll show you some of those results here. I do want to acknowledge my colleague. It's Dr. Guy Charles. He's our principal GIS scientist, and he's carried the weight on this project and past project and this one too. One of the other things that I had mentioned, or you saw in that previous slide, are for some of the goals, we had difficulty with construction sites and how those were defined in existing maps. So one of the goals we have is to tease out construction site from bare land, and that's actually fairly critical when it comes to interpreting how much impact has occurred over a 20 or more year period. In this case, what you're seeing is our CAR monitoring area in Snohomish County. It's outlined with the black lines. You'll also see here agricultural areas in kind of the canary yellow, cities and reservation, the Tulalip tribe land in the gray. We are not including cities and the agricultural areas because they fall under a different set of regulation beyond what our study is about in the rest of that CAR area. But with the exception, the Tulalip tribe's land will be included in our area of analysis. We have over 50 ESA sub-watersheds that are included in this study. Past CAR report, and I'm flying through this stuff. I know these will be available after. If I don't make it through all the slides, you'll see some more detail that can help interpret what I'm saying now. What we found was a loss in stream, lake, and marine buffers over a period from 2009 to 2021. Similarly, but greater impact was in loss of wetlands and wetland buffers within that same time period. But there was some uncertainty in all of this too, and I'll describe where that was at in a moment. When we look at what we examined for water bodies in this CAR monitoring area, we found that wetlands represented the largest of any of the water body types, their footprint and their buffers. We also found that, of course, as mentioned earlier, that those buffers and wetlands disappeared in a larger, to a greater degree. Some of the takes that we had from our monitoring report were the following. We found that we didn't know where all the streams were. We didn't know where all the wetlands were. You know, one of the, just an aside, I work in stream monitoring. We do a lot of habitat and biological evaluations. And oftentimes our iPad says the stream's going right and it actually goes left. So this impacts the total number of stream miles and the number of the buffer areas that we're trying to evaluate. And these are areas of uncertainty. The water courses that need improvement, wow, that's fast. 1 minute, holy mackerel. We're streams and wetlands. In any case, my boss wanted to make sure that we had some slide about what we can do about these changes that occur. And of course, there's education and outreach. There's the programmatic adjustments. Those are more at the county council level and others for policy. And then the other is projects in restoration and conservation. And depending on the amount of change that occurs, we will end up with some combination of those three. Quickly on this one, this is what's happening, the nuts and bolts. We have 4 partners. We've got Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, Seattle University, Snohomish County, and Esri, each contributing to different components of our remapping of wetlands. And you'll be able to see this in the available maps later on. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Robert. Our next speaker will be Alex Pittman, also from Snohomish County.
Cool. Thank you. Get through the rest of Rob's presentation here. Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah. So my name is Alex Pittman. I'm a watershed steward with Snohomish County Surface Water Management, and I'm here to talk about our Streamwise program. So we have 5,700 miles of streams in Snohomish County, according to the imperfect data that Rob referenced. And those flow through about 11,000 properties. And so as a watershed steward, my work really centers around this question of basically how can we best engage with those property owners to protect and improve stream health in the county. So the kind of takeaways of this are basically that successful engagement with those streamside households is a critical component of our efforts to improve stream health. We're currently working to redevelop our outreach program in a kind of social marketing context to improve engagement and connect us and our partners to high impact restoration project opportunities. And our HSIL funding is supporting that effort by allowing us to get some short-term consultant support to kind of build out and plan some key elements of that program. And I say redevelop because we've been doing this stuff under the guise of the excitingly titled Streamside Landowner Workshop for decades with awesome PowerPoint slides like this, which we continued to use basically unchanged for like 2 decades. But we'd sometimes do field tours. Like this is a field tour I did in partnership with the Snohomish Conservation District, and where we could try to provide landowners with on-the-ground riparian project support. So we wanted to basically kind of reset and redevelop our program with this kind of social marketing context so we could actually know that we're doing this as effectively and efficiently as possible. And a big part of that was basically kind of refocusing what we actually wanted it to be. So based on collaboration with some of Rob's teammates on our monitoring team, looking at what our local data was, our program had historically been focused basically just on riparian planting. And we've kind of wanted to be a little more holistic, but also keep it simplified. So we're focused now on kind of improving streamside vegetation and reducing bacterial pollution. So we're really promoting kind of 3 key behaviors: increasing the amount of native vegetation, maintaining proper function of their septic system, and managing pet and farm animal waste appropriately. And so here's where I'm going to start to fly through stuff, and there's more context in these slides, as Rob mentioned, if I get cut short, which I will. So we've done some audience research in the last few years, and a few things we found that were that audience has a really strong desire for clear and actionable resources. That awesome Streamside Landowner PowerPoint was pretty rambly, talking about all sorts of like kind of theoretical how streams move and what a watershed is. And we're really learning like people just want hands-on resources to help them take action. So these were some of the things they said would be most valuable, notably a kind of handbook to provide them clear guidance in person and kind of hands-on demonstrations and workshops and field tours, and kind of how-to videos. The things, again, they're most interested in are these kind of nuts and bolts, how do I do things topics. And they really want free native plants and help removing invasive plants. And so our HSIL funding kind of comes into play in this broader effort of just redeveloping this program by providing us with resources to actually kind of build out a program brand, test some key messaging, build out some of those elements, those resources that landowners said they wanted us to produce, and plan to kind of evaluate the program over time in this kind of social marketing context so we can keep refining it and making it as effective as possible. Another kind of key distinction that we found in our research that in kind of how we're going to be framing things moving forward is that I was wary that a lot of our outreach to riparian landowners was kind of this all or nothing message. Like, hey, I'm here to tell you, you should plant a 150-foot buffer. Not interested? Okay, see ya. And I really wanted to kind of frame things in a way that helped them feel like they had opportunity to take action and kind of start to build their identity as a steward of their stream, even if they weren't quite there yet, or maybe never would be. Like, even if they're only ever going to take some imperfect action, how can we get more people taking those imperfect actions and kind of leave the door open for some of these relationships to build and then get more comfortable with the idea? So hoping to just keep more conversations open for potential larger restoration projects moving forward. And so one of the things that we found that the audience really resonated with this is the idea of kind of like breaking some of those key things down in tiers. So like for the septic care, like rather than just being like maintaining your septic system and make sure it's working, kind of breaking that down. We have like a free workshop. Just attend that. That's a great first action. Then just get it inspected. Then if there's any deficiencies, take care of that. So just kind of like providing easy opportunities for folks to start taking action on these things. And then here's a bunch of things that kind of say the same thing. We're currently working on kind of finalizing our larger strategic plan for the program, experimenting with workshops and field tours, and kind of scoping out those elements that we're building with this grant. And then we're going to be launching it and hopefully collaborating with some kind of local partners. That's all I've got.
Thanks so much, Alex. Our next speaker will be Madison Bristol from the Snoqualmie tribe.
Yay. Thank you. It's exciting to be here today. So yes, I'm Madison Bristol. I'm the River and Floodplains Project Manager with the Snoqualmie tribe, and I'm here to tell you about 3 capacity building activities that the HSIL supported, which we're so happy about. So first off, to start in Lushootseed, it is the Snoqualmie people. They are the people of the moon. So kind of taking a step back, learning a little bit more about the Snoqualmie tribe. The Snoqualmie people have lived, hunted, gathered, and fished in this area for as long as the earth and rivers remember. The Snoqualmie Falls is the birthplace of the Snoqualmie people. The rushing waters give them the strength to keep traditions alive, and they continue to thrive in modern times. The Snoqualmie people are still here. So through this project, we had about $502,000, which is an amazing amount of funding to support 3 main goals, which I will cover all of them. First of those is adding tribal staff capacity. The second of those is ancestral forest restoration. And then the third is riparian and floodplain restoration. So to start off with, for this grant, it actually was written so that 1 new staff member was going to be hired. And in fact, 2 new staff people were hired. So that's really exciting. I was hired 2 months ago, so I'm super excited to be in this position. This has been awesome. Thank you. And then I also want to celebrate, he's not here, but Greg King is the tribe's first ever geologist, and he does absolutely amazing work. So this has supported both of our jobs. So moving on to the ancestral forest, the second priority of this grant, the tribe owns and manages 12,000 acres of previously industrially logged forest lands. And so there's a lot of active restoration happening in this ancestral forest. And one of the big parts that both us and the HSIL are really excited about is hiring an engineering consultant, and they'll help with restoration throughout these 12,000 acres. They'll also help with some bridge and road repair as well. So something that we see here on these bottom, these are 2 somewhat recent pictures. One was in November on the right, and that's low flows. And then in December, we got, or This is actually in January when this was taken. There was a huge flood event in December, and the road was still washed over in January. And so there's a lot of repairs that need to happen, a lot of culverts that need to be replaced with potentially bridges. And another thing that we're doing through this grant is developing a forest management plan. So this includes things like carbon sequestration, wildfire and flood resilience, ecosystem function, and cultural access. Now moving on to our third priority is riparian and floodplain restoration. And so the tribe partners with many partners in order to do this across the entire Snoqualmie Valley. But specifically through this project, we're focusing on 90 acres called the Griffin Creek properties right now. These are 2 properties that the tribe was able to buy within the past few years. One of the reasons why floodplain management is so important is because climate change is kind of wreaking havoc on our systems already. So we know that precipitation extremes, including droughts and flooding, are only going to get worse with climate change. In the Snoqualmie River, snowpack melt will decrease by 60%, while winter rain-driven stream flow will increase by 20 to 50% by 2080. That's a lot of water. We developed something called the Upper Snoqualmie Resilient River Corridor Management Plan, which if anyone wants to look at that, it's a great ArcGIS website, basically looking at resilience in the entire corridor and how we can achieve that. I wanted to illustrate for a second climate change impacts. So 2 different ways of looking at this. One is hydrographs. So we've got 2 hydrographs. One is for the December storm, which is on the right. And then January is on the left, which is kind of normal flows, kind of things that you typically see. So what you might typically see is flows of 2,000 to about 6,000 cubic feet per second. Thank you. But in December, we had about 67,000 cubic feet per second of water. That's a huge difference. These are actually crocheted granny squares that I made, which I just thought it was really fun to do that. Each line represents a different day. You can see I felt the intensity of this storm event in December when I made this. So that's why I wanted to show it. So going into what we're doing on these 90-acre properties, we have a lot of plans. We're really excited. We're doing a topographic surveys, tons of different surveys, ethnoarchaeology surveys, geoethnographic survey, just a bunch of different surveys, understanding this land and balancing river restoration and floodplain restoration with cultural use. That's really, really important. We want to rename these properties pretty soon to a Lushootseed place name. We also want to develop a culturally informed property management plan. And lastly, we want to build a community river stewardship coalition. There's already a lot of great work with farmers and people interested in flood and fish and the tribes already in the Snoqualmie Valley. We're just building this up more so that when we develop these properties, we're kind of working to build the resilience of the whole entire system. So that's all I got. Thank you so much. You can contact me, you can visit our plans, or you can visit our Environmental Natural Resources Department for lots of great blogs and news and et cetera. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Madison. Now we'll move on to our 2 longer talks for this session. So our next speaker will be April Hines from the city of Everett. Hello. I'm actually not as loud as I thought I would be. I've been known for my camp counselor kind of voice, so I'm kind of surprised I'm not that loud. So that's great. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the Regreen Everett behavior change campaign. We are in the 3rd year of our 4-year of this campaign. So being a behavior change campaign, the largest thing that you'll want to do is you want to find that kind of target audience, and then you want to select a behavior that you want to talk about. For us, we decided to engage with our North and Swamp Creek private property owners, and really the behavior being to increase vegetation in their private properties. So being a behavior change component, we had 3 kind of unique pieces to that. One being that we would be using social marketing campaign. And I'll talk a little bit about them in the next slide. It was going to be an incentive-based program, so obviously using that money, if we can, as a carrot to get people to do the behavior. And then one piece that we're really fortunate to have as part of this HSIL grant is we actually get to run the pilot again. That's a little bit unusual, and we're really excited about that piece. So we can actually take what we've learned and re-pilot it and see what we can do differently to perhaps engage even more. So I wasn't sure how many people in this room know about social marketing. So I did want to just highlight a little bit about what it is. So when you have a target audience and a behavior, you want to kind of figure out what are those barriers and opportunities potentially for that audience and from doing that behavior. So a barrier could be cost, it could be belief system, it could be not having transportation to get somewhere. So there's a lot of different barriers that you have. And so with the behavior change kind of program, you want to try to alleviate as many of those barriers as you can to someone doing that behavior. And so that really comes through doing a lot of formative research and audience surveying, which we did as the first part of this pilot, was to really do a lot of informational gathering to really kind of understand this audience. And really some of those key findings of barriers was obviously cost, right? Cost was a big thing. Time, understanding what the problem was and feeling inundated with the amount of information out there. And because of that, they felt like their site was just really complicated. It was different than everyone else. They didn't know what to do. So kind of being overwhelmed by what was available. Most are risk averse. They don't really want to do anything that kind of can upset their ecosystem of their property, even if that means it's all blackberries. So they can really be kind of risk averse to doing something different with their properties. And then based on that, you kind of want to do your campaign, and then you have that time afterwards to kind of evaluate and really think, what are we going to do differently? What did we miss when we kind of were coming together with our campaign? So I do want to back up a little bit and explain why we chose the area and audience that we did. The biggest reason why we decided to go for this grant is because we have a SMAP. A SMAP is something that municipalities are required to do through the MPDS stormwater permit, and it's a stormwater management action plan. So what came out of that was you're really finding out what is your priority basin that you need to be doing some stormwater work within. For us, it was North Creek. If you look at this little, is that the, oh, there it is. So if you look at this map, you can see I've circled the Swamp Creek, which is what's on the left, and North Creek, which is on the right. And this gradient is showing the high population density. So this area of Everett is extremely urbanized. There is not a green space around at all in North Creek. And this is the headwaters for North Creek. So there is the green, which you see here are kind of bigger parks. There is absolutely no green in North Creek. So these are really highly urbanized areas. These are areas where you have very overburdened communities that have a lot of social, economics, and environmental stressors in their life. So, and there's limited green space, so you can imagine how degraded these streams are probably. But when we did the stormwater management action plan and it came up with North Creek, one of the suggestions that were made within that is reaching out to private property owners and talking to them about what they could do on their properties as riparian landowners, because that's something where there was no room in this area to preserve green space or other things. So really, what were some of the opportunities that we had, especially within North Creek? And so we really felt like this was going to be a great way to build that relationship with kind of a new audience, really, because I'm part of the City of Everett Public Works. And, you know, we do stormwater, but we don't necessarily work with private properties, and we don't necessarily work with stream restoration. So this really was going to be a new kind of building of a relationship in the community. So as part of our program that we decided to do was we did a mix of workshops and site visits, and then we kind of did that through canvassing and postcards. So the biggest thing that come out of this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the recruitment, was workshops don't work, at least not in Everett. They were something that workshops where kind of what we found a little bit later, people were like, I'm just not a workshop person. Or they felt like their site is so complicated that why do I want to go to a workshop where people are going to talk about this kind of generalized idea when it's not going to help me on my property. So we found that site visits were above and beyond, way more popular. And everyone who did the site visits really loved it, which we'll talk a little bit later. But the site visit was really a face-to-face with me, who was someone from the city. along with our partner, Snohomish Conservation District. And we would kind of walk the site. We talk about their concerns, what kind of solutions we could actually offer through this grant process, and then giving them a homeowner packet, which included all the information down here. This will be important for later. So you can see that there's a long list there. So once we went through that process, we actually were able to, we did about 20 site visits, which one of the things I didn't mention earlier was our pool of audience was pretty small. This was only about 1,200 potential, and that's potential. That's not even to say it was possible with all 1,200, but that was kind of our audience that we were targeting. So we did actually meet our deliverable, which was 5 sites, and they were very different from each other, which highlighted that idea that everybody had complicated sites. And then the nice thing is that they were kind of evenly split between North and Swamp Creek. And just to kind of touch upon the timing, we did the site visits in April and the work started in November. So that's about a 6-month lull of saying, great, you're in the program, excited you're here, we'll come back in 6 months. So after we were able to complete those, which we finished in December, in January, we actually did some very in-depth interviews with all of our participants, along with some of those that we actually did site visits with, where we weren't able to actually assist them through this program. And really the feedback that came back was that the on-site expertise was invaluable, that they were able to get all their questions answered. One of the other things is that site visits were obviously really important and valuable, but along with being that expert, actually having a city person there was actually pretty helpful. I kind of had heard through the grapevine that being a government entity would be pretty frowned upon and they weren't going to be excited about having it, because if you think about it, a lot of these people had probably had interactions with the city and it was probably through code enforcement or some kind of compliance thing. But the nice thing about being there and kind of offering our expertise is a lot of times they felt like they were able to kind of be that conduit and get their questions answered about how to navigate things within the government. And so that ended up working out really well as a side kind of benefit. The 10-year agreement was a little bit of a hesitant for folks. They were really hesitant to kind of that risk averse, right? So wanting to not sign an agreement that was about maintenance, even though if you really read through it, it wasn't that complicated or punitive, but it still was kind of like a big hurdle for folks. And then, so we're in the good part now. We get to evaluate what we did and kind of really cherry pick and figure out what we need to do differently this time going forward. So some of the pieces that we felt really worked was the postcards. We heard every single one of the homeowners that we talked to remembered getting one. And then we actually did a premium QR code on all of those postcards so that we could actually track when people would actually use the QR code and where they were, coming from. And so we could really see a match with when they would get a postcard to when they would go to the website and potentially sign up for a site visit. Multiple touches, heard from a few. One was like, oh, I got all your postcards and I think you finally wore me down. And so I finally contacted you. So multiple touches does work. The site visits were obviously a favorite. The site work, I want to give a big thanks to Snohomish Conservation District. They did an awesome job with all of these sites. Kind of a nice little bonus was drone footage. I did not know I was going to have that resource available to me, but I ended up having that. And really being able to do these aerial of before and afters is great, but also just making that connection with the stream. So we actually had one site where we were able to have them working on the site, and then we actually had our crews doing some stream sampling right next door because they had one of their sites right there. So really making that larger picture. What didn't work? Workshops. Your standard workshop model just does not work with this group, at least within the city of Everett. We really felt like maybe there's a different way to do that maybe it's more about those can be little education, like mini workshops available online that they can look at anytime, maybe kind of like your how-to kind of videos. Let's see. I probably go a little bit faster on some of this. The delivery method for the homeowner packet. I don't know if you remember, but that list was really long and no one remembers getting the homeowner packet. And we had a lot of valuable information in there, but we really felt like with the site visit that it was most important to kind of get them excited and just be like, hey, here's what we can do.
we'll be back in touch with the planting plan, and then maybe talk about the more boring details that you need to talk about later on after you've got them on board. So what's next? So we're going to be piloting again. What we've kind of learned is not going to be doing the standard workshop. We're really going to focus more on site visits, talk way more about invasive removal. That is obviously the biggest reason why people are interested in this, is having someone go in there and do the nitty gritty work of pulling out all of those blackberries and bringing in some native plants. Talked about that already. Before and after. That was something we heard a lot, is using before and afters can be so effective, but we didn't have any. So we had to do a lot of illustrations and drawings, but now we actually have a lot of that before and after and the work in between. So we're definitely going to be using a lot more of that as we continue. In closing, I just want to really say that the impact of this grant has been really great for us within the city of Everett. We not only have really started to really build relationships within that community, which is new for us. Riparian outreach has kind of led us to actually including this as another piece of our behavior change component, which we have to do as part of the NPDES permit. We have to do a behavior change component. So we're actually going to kind of do what we're already doing, but tweak it a little bit. So what we discovered when we were kind of initially looking at this and kind of doing canvassing and figuring out where do we want to target, we realized that there are a lot of City of Everett little parcels of land that are sitting there in these little neighborhoods with homes all around them. And we're like, why don't we actually do some work on our own site and see if we can actually cluster with the community that's right there and do kind of a comparison of just this to that and what really helps move that needle in the sense of homeowners doing the behavior. And then the other big thing is we were actually able to create a local online presence about riparian landowners. We've never really done that within the city. We've kind of steered clear of that. And now we really want to become that nexus where people can get information about what they can do and what they can't do on their property. And so this has really helped us jump to that next level. So we're really excited about that piece. And I think that's it for me.
Time for questions. Do you want to say? We have time for a couple questions, and we'll repeat the question on the mic for the recording, but if folks can just raise your hand and shout it out.
So the question is about canvassing, since I mentioned it under the category of not working. So that was really on us. So what ended up happening is, it was something that when you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, canvassing, it'll be great. We came up with door hangers and everything. We mostly ran out of time and we kind of went down a rabbit hole because what ended up happening is we were trying to drive around and find good potential sites. And that's when we discovered that, wow, there's a lot of city. There's a lot of city parcels here. And we could totally be outreaching to the people within these city parcels. But then that really is a different message, right? You want to kind of do something on your own site. And so it kind of led us this little bit of a rabbit hole. So we didn't get around to canvassing is more the issue. But we are going to do it this time. Because one of the things I also didn't mention is one of the things that we did learn that worked well was having an advisory group. That was great because you're not doing something so internally that you can get a little blindsided by things. Our advisory group had people from our stormwater division, had people in planning, had a nonprofit group. It had people from the community, all in this advisory group. And after they kind of saw what we've been doing, they're like, oh, I know a site. I know a neighbor. I know a homeowner. And so I think our canvassing this time will be really different and could be potentially a great way to connect with people. Thanks, April.
All right, our next presenter is Bob Warner from the Washington State Recreation and Conservation Office.
Thank you. So I think that's Everett's background on there. And so I don't know how that got on there. It looks better than mine, so whatever. Okay. That's a little bit different too. Okay, anyways, hi. I'm Bob Warner. I'm a grant manager at RCO, and I'm going to tell you today a little bit about our shore-friendly program. Shore Friendly is a program that is co-managed between Washington Fish and Wildlife and RCO. My co-manager, Jenna Jewett, is home with a sick child today, so she's not here. But I'm just gonna kind of put into 12 minutes what I could talk about all day and see if I can make it in 12 minutes. Just kind of give you an overview of our program and how HSIL integrates with the program. And so I noticed that there's several people in the audience today that know a lot about Shore Friendly. And so if I say something, if you notice something that I say that's incorrect or wrong, if you could please just keep that to yourself, I'd appreciate it. Okay, so Shore Friendly, the mission of Shore Friendly is really to reduce armoring in Puget Sound and resulting in the restoration of beaches. The focus is on the residential population, kind of at a parcel scale, and I'm working with residential landowners to help them do good things on the shoreline. And so the objective that we're working on to get to the mission is behavior change. So what we're trying to do is help people have a different perspective of what their shoreline property is like, and kind of help them understand, hopefully, that a natural shoreline has benefits to them and not just to habitats. And so we can encourage them to change their shorelines. And so the methods we use are technical support, financial assistance, and really outreach, where HSIL fits in, is a really important part of that. So we have, so my slides are a little bit screwed up, but that's okay. So we have 6 local leads. So we cover all of Puget Sound with the Shore Friendly program, including the Strait of Juan de Fuca. We have Northwest Straits, Kitsap County, Mid-Sound Fisheries, Island County, Snohomish Tribal Community, and then 3 conservation districts in the South Sound that are our partners. So the funding. So Shore Friendly started initially as a pilot project in like 2014, 2015, 17. And that was funded partially by NEP. Thanks, Lisa, for getting that. But so NEP was really kind of at the beginning when that was initiated. But when Shore Friendly kind of got really kind of structured, it was funded with ESRP money and ESRP capital funds. And so ESRP as capital funds can't really pay for outreach. They can pay for feasibility, design, permitting, and constructing of the projects, and with a little bit of money to encourage or to recruit landowners, but really no outreach. So that's where HSIL comes in to provide the money for the outreach. And so HSIL 1.0 is really kind of focusing on events, workshops, and then site visits to help people get their projects underway. And so the funding for 1.0 was integrated into ESRP Shore Friendly funding. And so it wasn't really a separate thing. It was kind of like when they billed us in the beginning, we just paid for the outreach with the HSIL funds, and then we paid for the design and implementation with the ESRP funds. So like I said, it focused on education and site visits, and this funding is very critical for the Shore Friendly program, because without the outreach, we don't have a way to get the word out, initiate contact with landowners, and start this process. And anybody that's done restoration knows that the limiting factor to restoration is really landowner willingness to do work. And so if we're not contacting the landowners, we're not going to be doing projects. I kind of like this color scheme. So this is a thing that Jenna came up with, and this is the project pipeline as we're talking about. And so it really starts with this outreach that is funded by HSIL, going through landowner recruitment and design and technical assistance to implementation. And so this is where HSIL initially focused on with the outreach and recruiting landowners. And then we have this feedback loop. So sometimes when we implement projects, we have that as a demonstration project to help new landowners see what their land can look like if they follow this process. So the results of the first round of HSIL was the pilot that we had is turned into a real program. We're covering all of Puget Sound. A lot of small projects got implemented, and HSIL kind of became like a recognizable program, and so people along the shoreline kind of knew about it a little bit. And it's initiated behavior change on some level, and it really originated in a lot of large projects. And so this is just kind of some of the metrics of what was what was done in the first round. Lots of contacts, site visits, and workshops. We helped people with feasibility, design, and some implementation. A lot of the implementation that is kind of held within the Shore Friendly program is small, but we got some small projects done. But really, we found that the value of Shore Friendly in kind of a grander sense is to initiate projects with landowners that will go to other funding organizations to do larger, more significant projects. And these are the projects that originated from the first round. So in HSIL 2.0, it's much more focused on outreach and kind of really identifying areas where we can affect behavior change more effectively. And and as a critical part of Shore Friendly, we took on this new HSIL grant. So similar to the other one, it's at the beginning, but it's really kind of way more focused on outreach than it was initially. So social media is one of the big focuses of our new grant. We have, and these are a few examples, and I know some of these are from the old HSIL, so don't tell me that. Okay, so we have like these videos. We have these short videos that are just like kind of TikTok videos that that you can just click on, and they're kind of entertaining and fun. We have longer videos that have Northwest Straits really kind of has spearheaded these, where they're like really explaining the value in a really kind of story type way that can get you to understand Shore Friendly. And then websites and YouTube and other things that are media for social media. And then another thing we have is called Broader Impacts, where we have people going out to conferences and presenting about Shore Friendly to kind of spread the word and also learn from those conferences on how we can improve our work for Shore Friendly. We have project showcases that are our additional media products that like story maps and slideshows and other things that can really show the work that we're doing in Puget Sound along the shoreline. And this is just the beginning of a presentation that was done by Lisa Kaufman at a conference, and it's just kind of spreading the word of Shore Friendly out to other people and helping them understand what we're trying to do. And one of the most significant things we're doing is influencer training. And so this is we're developing curriculum to bring it to what we're calling influencers, and that's like people that are doing the work on the shoreline, the actual contractors that are doing work. And then another group we're focusing on is planners. So what this does, like specifically for the contractors, it gives them ideas of what they can do that are different than just hard armor, like soft shore to, things that are like actually restoration focused instead of armor focused. And it also gives them new opportunities of armor removal. I think there have been some of the contractors that were thinking, oh, wow, I've been doing armor for 20 years, but I didn't ever think about removing armor as a project to get paid for. And then planners, so talking like local planners to provide them ideas that they can guide people that are coming in for permits to, do other than just your traditional hard armor. And this is, the planners, I think it's more focused on kind of a holistic view of the function and values of the shoreline so they can more effectively protect what they're there to protect. And this is local priorities. So of the 6 entities that we have as our subrecipients, they have in their local areas, they have unique priorities that can be served by newsletters and local events that really kind of are tailored to what they feel is most effective in their area. And we have these welcome packets that we send out when people buy new houses along the shoreline, and it's just kind of a more focused, intimate outreach. So in 2.0, like I said, we really broadened the outreach of Shore Friendly. We really have increased the shore-friendly presence in Puget Sound. It's something that people recognize when you talk to them. And we're initiating more projects. And so this is a list of the projects that have come off of our beach restoration small grants. And all these projects are originated from Shore Friendly. And so, and this is just the beginning, because our ESRP program is just started, or just underway, and we don't have I don't have the figures for how many of those projects were originated in Shore Friendly, but there's a lot of them. And so we're really starting to get a lot of big projects coming out of Shore Friendly, and it's really working. And so this is the stats so far. We're not done. We're a little bit over halfway done with our HSIL 2.0 grant. We're getting a huge amount of social media views, lots of people attending the workshops that are being put on by our leads. There's dozens of events happening, lots of projects getting started, and lots of ideas that are coming out of these discussions that we're having with landowners and other professionals that are involved with Shore Friendly. Oh, you can't see my stuff. Yeah, if you squint, you can see how to contact us. But that's what I have to say, and I will try to answer any questions if you guys have any. Melissa, right? Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So when Shore Friendly was initiated, before the formal ESRP Shore Friendly, there was some social marketing that looked into what would be effective actions to take to affect behavior change. And so that was kind of the foundations, and there's other research that went into kind of the initiation of Shore Friendly. So there's that, but there's also been a social marketing survey that was done through Fish and Wildlife that is almost done, and we're gonna. And so yes, I can't tell you what the results are now, but hopefully I will be able to in the next few months. Yeah. No more questions? All right, thanks.
Thanks, Bob. We have a bit of time, so I want to open it now for questions for any of the presenters in the session. I know a lot of the groups that have presented have gone for like individual parcels and landowners, and I'm curious as to what the efforts have been to target like neighborhood groups. Like, are you trying to get neighborhood of landowners in a room and talk to a neighborhood so that they can kind of try to influence each other's behavior, or is it really just focused on each parcel and why? And the question was targeting neighborhoods versus parcel scale.
I think the easy answer to that is it's really difficult to do that. I think that one of the things that we've struggled with, even as a municipality, is just figuring out who is in charge of an HOA or who oversees the stormwater pond that they're have in their neighborhood or anything like that. So if you're just looking for neighborhoods, you sometimes have to find that the cheerleader neighborhood person who wants to, start the process. Like one of the people who participated in this, she's one of those community people, she's on advisory committee, she's on the neighborhood board. So she's someone who can be a great advocate for that, but it really is difficult to pinpoint even who to contact when you start looking at a neighborhood as a whole. You have to really kind of finagle your way into that by happenstance, just happens to be somebody who wants to engage with you that way. We are finding with this potential use of city sites that we may be able to do a little bit of that in the sense of if they have some green space where they either have a stormwater pond or if they just have an easement there where they're using it and maintaining it, we might be able to kind of work with the neighborhood, but it's a difficult door to get through, honestly. At least that's true for us.
Yeah, so I think that it's a good question. When we're working on the parcel scale, obviously you have limited benefit to that, right? And so often in the shore friendly world, we're doing like 100 feet of shoreline, which isn't, it's something, but it's not like as significant as these bigger projects. But a couple of things. One is often when neighbors are there and they're seeing what's happening, they can get them involved, and so we can get maybe a 3 parcel shoreline, and that happens fairly regularly. But also, if you looked at that pipeline slide that I had, we had that feedback loop where we use people that we've done successful projects on their property. We use their property as an example, and we bring groups around, and it really kind of is a compelling way to get people to understand what their opportunities are. And it's not like right in the neighborhood, but it's kind of in the regional areas with our regional leads.
So I'm Lisa Kaufman. I'm the lead for the Northwest Straits Shore Friendly Program. And so what we do, we do the workshops and we do get responses. But when we do individual site visits, when people come to us and request a site visit, we have a whole survey that they fill out before we say yes or no to their survey or to their site visit. And as part of that, one of the questions is, do you have neighbors that might be interested? And we incentivize that particular landowner by getting neighbors involved by telling them that we're not going to send like a consultant in our case out typically just for one landowner unless we have others kind of in the region. So if we can get 2, 3, 4 neighbors all at one time, then we know we can schedule them quicker. And so that kind of incentivizes landowners to think about their neighbors. Doesn't always happen, but it's one way that we try and do that as well. And whether it results in a full big project or not, we at least know that all those landowners next to each other are kind of getting the same information at the same time. And we do it not just from a site visit perspective, we might encourage like a beach walk together or something like that. So.
Yeah, so my project's a little bit different in that we're working with one specific site with the tribe and 2 properties that were bought. And so with that said, there are like neighbors that we're trying to work with. And one of them is a very prominent farm that has a CSA program that like delivers to Seattle and everything like that very frequently floods. And meanwhile, our properties have more upland areas. And then they also have some areas that we could expand the floodplain and potentially reduce those impacts to neighbors. And so having those conversations, it feels like really strong relationship building with all of the neighbors and beneficial for everyone instead of just isolating to kind of like one parcel, I would say. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, big thanks to all of our presenters. So now we'll be taking a break and then we'll reconvene in the Grand Hall for our final panel and some closing remarks. Coffee, tea, and pastries are available in the River Room at the back of the Grand Hall, although the break starts at 1:30, so just be mindful that there might still be a session going on in there for now. And then we'll reconvene in the Grand Hall at 2:55. And big thanks to all of our presenters. Thanks so much.